All right, so welcome to the Wowza support webinar. This is Wowza Streaming Cloud 201. I am your host, Justin Miller, and we are going to be talking about, well, as you guessed it, Wowza Streaming Cloud. Before we begin, I do want to put up some poll questions. So if you haven't had a chance, please answer some of these questions, which is one, what industry are you in, as well as two, what would you consider your level of Wowza Streaming Cloud knowledge to be? So if you could answer those, I definitely appreciate it. We are going to be starting right now with just this introduction, as well as an introduction to the speakers. Well, they're going to get directly into low latency streaming best practices. And that will be by Jeff. Jeff, I'm very excited to hear that. We're also going to be talking about converting RTMP to WebRTC. A lot of people often ask how to do that, and luckily Mac is here to tell you how. We'll also be talking about Fastly versus Akamai, which one would be best for you, as well as how to do pre-recorded video as live. After that, we're going to open it up for some other Q&A, but we definitely will answer any Q&A questions during that time. So if you do have questions, just ask them right away. Be sure to ask them in the Q&A window. The chat window is not available for asking questions, but the Q&A window is. In fact, if you just want to make sure it works, please go ahead and type in where you're from. We always like to know where you are located. I can see a few people have answered the poll questions. I'm just going to leave it open a little while longer while we have our presenters introduce themselves, starting with Mac Hill.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, my name is Mac Hill, Senior Manager here on the Wowza support team. Been with Wowza about 6.5 years now, and I was very fortunate when I first started with Wowza, cut my teeth on the cloud product on service. And so I've been here from the start with cloud and still hanging in there and still helping the team with that. And so really just excited to be able to share some of these new features and some tips and tricks with you guys today. And so glad to be here. And Rose.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. My name is Rose Power, and I am the Developer Community Manager here at Wowza. And I answer a lot of your questions in the forums about Streaming Cloud and have some tips and tricks to share with you today. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff, one of the technical support engineers in the technical support department. So chances are we probably had an email together. I've been in streaming for probably 6 years now and with Wowza for about 3.
All right. Well, hey, Matt, Rose, Jeff, thank you for joining us. I'm going to end the poll right now, and I'm also going to say hi to Liz over there in San Jose. Liz, thank you for joining us. I used to live in San Jose, although I never called myself a Sanho. I know, none of you get the joke. All right, let's move on here to low latency best practices. Take it away, Jeff.
All right. So I was going to put this together in some screenshots, but I figured a direct walkthrough with some settings would work better. I'm using OBS simply because it's what I have on site, but any encoder you're using should have similar settings to this. A lot of them run FFmpeg on the back end, so they'll at least have something that's the equivalent of it. As far as low latency goes, there's a few different important things to consider. Is your input health, for one, is very important, especially with a low latency environment, because you're reducing the buffer time that we have to actually compile the track or heal the stream. So when you're calculating out your frame size, and you want to make sure that your bit rate is on point with that. So in this case, as a general benchmark for 1920 by 1080, I chose 4 megs. That's a pretty standard bit rate for sort of low action content that you're not seeing a lot of movement in, maybe speeches or talking heads type thing. If you're doing something with sports or a lot of movement and running, it may be a better idea to run with 6 megabits, just to give you a bit more room as far as the data flow. The second most important thing is the keyframe rate and the keyframe interval matching up 1-to-1. With latency especially, this, sorry, my settings there are wrong, but your keyframe interval being 1-to-1 with your frame rate will allow us to package everything all in one segment at that point. So you get 30 frames plus 1 keyframe instead of the standard keyframe every 2 seconds. So it's definitely important to make sure that either you have control of your source frame rate, or if you don't, you know exactly what it is so that you can then set your keyframe interval off of that. And especially later, we'll be getting into WebRTC. That becomes a bit more relevant because it is more real time at that point. The rest of these settings, like your profile is typically related to your frame size. So in this case, we're going with high. On 720, we also generally recommend running high. And then the CPU preset's not really that relevant in this case. And one thing that you can add that we do always suggest with the cloud is scene cut equals 0. This specifically comes up if you are using multiple scenes in your stream. So if you have one camera view on the left, one camera view on the right, and you're switching between those, scene cut will force your encoder to then go back and realign all of the keyframes on the different feeds, so that by the time it comes out to us, it's one single feed rather than a different cuts from different angles. And then from there, outside of that, it's really monitoring the input health, because in a real-time environment, if there are any blips or glitches or anything on the input, it tends to put us at a disadvantage when we go to deliver it. So like in OBS, they'll have a little red square or a green square at the bottom right, but most other encoders will also have something to monitor it with. And it's not necessary during the entire event, but it is good to get the testing out of the way first so that you can spot any of these tiny nuances, because even the slightest thing going off could eventually cause problems down the line on your event and lead to bigger problems. So outside of that, though, the most important thing for latency is really your keyframe interval. And as long as you have that set correctly, you should be able to serve through to WebRTC at around 3 seconds. We also have low latency HLS, which is around 3 seconds. And then there's like lower latency, quote unquote, which is just smaller chunk size HLS, which we can typically get to around 5 to 6 seconds or so in a really healthy environment, sometimes 10.
Right. Hey, so gonna jump in, just discussion roundtable real quick. So a couple of things. I agree 1,000% with everything you said. I know there's a couple of things that have come in recently that around B frames, as far as dropping B frames at the encoder that also improve latency. And that's one of the things that have been recommended. I know through our ProServe service, that team has found that dropping the B frames at the encoder will it actually improves the decoding on the end. So we see a much shorter time of getting it out. We have to do less at the transcoder. We have to do less at the decode on the playback. And so they're seeing a better playback experience there, specifically in WebRTC. Just maybe a tidbit for folks on the call here. So that's one thing we can do. And maybe Jeff, maybe after the call, we can, for OBS, if everybody out there is playing, whoever's playing with OBS, I know that there's a B-frame command option for the X264. And I don't know on the tune, I don't know if the tune, there's a no latency, I think.
Yeah.
Or 0 latency. That might be what it's doing. I don't know what it's doing in the background there, which I think is interesting. And then, and I just wanted to mention on the profile, which is kind of interesting. When we had the SDK, one of the things that's interesting that came up in conversation there is the profile. A piece of that was interesting is it really kind of depends on who your audience is, right? So if you're doing a primarily mobile only audience, you may want to back down your profile, right? So let's say, for example, I'm doing mobile only, and maybe not everybody's running the latest and greatest. Maybe they're not on iPhone 12s, or maybe they're not on iPhone 11s, but maybe they'll back down. Maybe you're in a region of the world where they're really on 7s and 8s still. You may want to lean towards a baseline. It's easier to decode for the device. If you're running high only, you may find that the device, depending on what player you're using and how they're decoding it, the devices might get really warm after a while, depending on what you're doing, right? Versus set-top boxes, right? Or OTT boxes. high all day long, right? So if you're doing 720s, or you're doing 4K, you're doing 1080s, yeah, definitely high all day long, right? So I think that's an important thing. So sometimes when it comes to profile, I just think it's important. I just want to make sure that we're pointing out here that there's not always a one size fits all. So what's important is when we're transcoding on those adaptive bit rates, customers out there who are looking at those transcoder templates, if you're looking, you'll see that each rendition, as you get lower, the base, it'll change the main, it'll change the baseline based on what's available to the customer. So just FYI, good talk. Yeah. Makes sense?
Yeah. And
yeah,
that's a fair point too. I will look up the zero latency thing and see if it's a specific X264 options for B frames. I do apologize for that. I forgot about the B frame side.
No, you're good.
I will tell you that I've used zero latency, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what I was doing this for. It might have been actually Mac RTMP2 WebRTC, something to that extent. But I did have to add in B frames equals 0 to that X264 options.
You had to add it
with it saying zero latency. So I don't remember whether zero latency on its own helped or not. I remember still having to put it in. That also being said, just to make sure we're on the same track here of, these settings, I noticed at the top you have rescale output as opposed to just going under recording and change that to 920 by 1080.
Yeah, so I just set that so I had the screen in one view, but you can also set your default base canvas over here and uncheck that.
For audio, do you have any recommendations in terms of, should we be doing a sample rate of 48 kilohertz or is it 42?
Yes, so 44.1 is actually an analog sample rate for audio, and HLS and RTMP can still use it, but newer technologies will have a lot of issues with it. So anytime you have the ability to move to 48 kilohertz, it's definitely something we recommend going forward using anything. This is sort of a new standard compared to 44.1 was in 2003, 2004. So that especially if you're going from RTMP to WebRTC, it's also important to note that Opus and a couple other containers outside of AAC do not allow for 44.1 at all, and it'll process it in some cases, and you'll get garbled audio, or it'll drop the entire audio track completely.
Right, which is a great point. Just point of note, and it's not a dig on anyone, but we found out recently, Zoom, if you wanted to push from Zoom into the platform and get it back out on WebRTC to an audience, Zoom pushes out 44.1 in their sample rate, and we've seen some issues as we try to. We're finding that we're going to have to resample that audio to 48 to get it back out to WebRTC, or it's going to be difficult. But yeah, we're finding that is an issue. So send your stuff in at 48 is ideal for getting out to most audiences. So good information. So
and then similar thing with your bit rate as well too. So if you're anticipating a lower bandwidth audience, it may be better to run with like MP3 quality at 96 rather than like super high stereo at 128 or 192. Just depending on how you're setting up. On the audio side, it's not as relevant as the video bit rate, but if you're working with, like a 3G connection that's only got a couple of bars, every kilobit counts at that point.
All right. Jeff, is there anything else we're going to show here?
I think we are set on the OBS side.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was great. Again, I've mentioned to everyone in the chat window, but if you do have questions, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A window at any time. Definitely, I know there are many people who are currently using OBS, and certainly there are some people using vMix and Telestream that might be interested in knowing where to find information. We do have information on some of these things, both on YouTube as well as our own website. So feel free, if you have any questions, once again, to ask them. Beyond that, Mac, I believe you're next.
Sure, yeah. So let's talk about I'm going to continue with OBS on my side, but we're going to talk about converting RTMP to WebRTC. And one of the cases, or one of the questions we get a lot is, how do I get lower latency, right? Jeff's talked about how do I get a source tweaked and optimized in to send in for better latency. The primary output that we have in cloud is HLS, right? Majority of our outputs come from our CDNs. So it's either going to come from Akamai, it's going to come from Fastly, HLS primarily. And HLS, the best latency on average you're going to see coming from our CDNs is going to be between 10 and 15 seconds. There's no guarantees there. But on HLS with 2-second chunks, that's really about the best you're going to see, depending on where the viewers are in the world, right? And so when we have customers who come in and they want to see sub 5, sub 10, it's going to be very difficult to do, even with the lower latency settings for HLS. So today we just wanted to walk you through an option, and this is going to be for those who have audiences of like 300 or less. Audiences who aren't really going to be global. Okay, this is going to be a situation where your audience is going to play directly back from the transcoder. So geographic location is everything in this situation. So we want your encoder to be as close to the transcoder as possible. We want your viewers to be as close as possible in order to get the lowest latency. All right. So I just wanted that to be clear as we go into this demo. So I do want to show this really quickly. Justin did a great video walkthrough on this, and he went the path of using the live stream method on setting this up, and you can see the full video, you can see the transcript and everything. So we're going to provide this link out in the follow-up email after. Lori will send that out to you guys. But I just wanted you to see that this is available, but I'm going to give you the quick and dirty on how to set up a quick transcoder with an output and what that kind of looks like. So in my account, real quick, I've already got one set up, but I'm going to start it in the background. And I'll let that do a startup in the back while we're doing that. Okay, so I'm going to go in my account. I'm going to go advanced. Actually, I want to hide that. I'm going to go to advanced to transcoders. I'm going to add a transcoder, and I'm going to call this a demo for you. I got to keep it adaptive because I need transcoding to occur. I'm going to choose something close to me. It's going to be RTMP in. I'm going to kick it in from OBS. I don't want a buffer, right? I want this as low as possible. I'm going to disable authentication this time, right? And I don't want anything else fancy. I want to keep this as low lift as possible. I think that's everything. Sound right, Justin? As far as I know.
Looks good.
Yeah, good. Very simple.
I'm not muted.
When you're not muted, that's good. So I've created the basic transcoder. Now I'm going to create an output, and we'll do a 1080. So I'll create this 1080 output here. And then I'm going to edit this output. The video stays the same at H.264, and I change the audio to Opus. And if you want to tweak the bit rate, you can, based on what Jeff said. You can tweak the audio if you want. You can change profile. You can change any of this you want. I'm just going to leave it alone for now, just to show the point. And then it's done. That's it. We're not going to add any stream targets to this because we're just going to play directly back. We're not pushing out. We're not sending this anywhere else, right? So we're done. At this point, I would hit start, and this will be exactly at this point what I've already created over here. So I'm going to go back over to my other one that I've already started. It's now running. It's ready to go. And I'm going to start my OBS. I'm going to kind of drag OBS in here, just to kind of see. So I've just got this loop going here, and I'm going to start it up. Hey, I just need to do some redemption and some full transparency. I chose the wrong demo transcoder when I fired that off. So all those settings were right. I just chose the wrong. Anyway, this you're going to see a couple seconds in latency there, but yeah, this is what it would look like in theory. So just
awesome.
just so you know. I'm not
So yeah,
completely.
we're seeing about 2 seconds, right? Or a little
Yeah,
under 2
it's about 2
seconds.
seconds. Yeah. So the send and the receive in the back there. So good stuff. You can take that back. Yeah,
let's
go
talk
ahead.
about Fastly versus Akamai.
Cool. I just wanted to kind of give a comparison. You know, we what's it been, a year or two that we began transitioning to Fastly, and we actually changed Fastly as a default, and there wasn't a whole lot of discussion. It just kind of happened, and so it was a decision. And part of the reason that we made that decision, if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, a big piece of it was built on features. Architecturally, there's a difference in how we send our data or how the data is distributed. So I think it's important to understand that we push the data, the chunks, if you will, we push that to Akamai. So we make that connection through a push. We send it to them. So we got to make that connection. We send it over to them. With Fastly, it's different. Fastly actually pulls it from us. And so there's some other architecture happening in between there. There's some storage, and there's all kinds of caching situations happening, and it's a completely different infrastructure. But through the different infrastructure, that's what allows you to have the VOD streams. That's what allows you to have different features, different options that we have. So as you kind of look at the comparison over here, yes, we still have geo-blocking. Yes, we still have token authorization. And yes, Akamai has more token auth restrictions. That's why you have to go through the support team. Fastly, you can do it all on your own. You don't require the support team to set up token auth or geo-blocking or any of that. You can do all of that unrestricted. CORS is still there. The AES 128, all AES 128, all that actually happens on the transcoder, but the CDNs, they support that. And then obviously you can do VOD streams on Fastly. We don't support VOD on Akamai because again, we're pushing everything to everything to Akamai. Akamai is not caching anything for us to support the VOD piece. The one thing that Akamai does that Fastly does not do is that Akamai does provide a redundant output. So you can set that up on the transcoder where you can send two, primary and backup output, or it's dual chunkless and dual chunks. So you'll send a primary and backup. The caveat is you have to have a player that will see that and flip. It has to support the dual chunk list. So you'll see a primary and a backup. So in the chunk list. So it's nice having the failover on the back end, on the internet side, for the playlist, for the playback when you have that. So in an ideal world, which we don't have currently anymore, in an ideal world, you've got redundancy on the front end. In a perfect world, we'd have redundancy in the middle, and then that would also provide redundancy in the end. But if your clients or customers are requesting some sort of redundancy, this is a good piece for the back end delivery. If that's something that you have to deliver. Otherwise, Fastly delivers a few other options that aren't available on Akamai. One being easy DRM. So DRM is probably the most secure option for your content. It is another service. It is something that does cost more, but in the world we live in, we protect what we value most. And so if we really value our content and we have concerns of that content getting into the wrong hands, DRM may be your best option. And so we did get that integrated into the cloud, and Fastly is the option that was supporting that for us through a CDN option. So you don't, in the past, it was very much engine origin edge, where you had to use engine to engine to deliver all of that. And now we have the CDN to be able to do that. So we're excited about that. Also, there wasn't a lot of advertisement about it, but we can also deliver Dash through Fastly. So if that's something you're needing for set-top boxes or something like that, that is available to you, that's in there. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you, if you're familiar with or able to use the REST API. We did, I think in March, we released in our beta, our REST API 1.7 beta, the ability to set in a domain refer policy. And so it's kind of exciting because it's another layer or another level of security. So if you're not necessarily concerned about the security of the stream being taken or stolen, if you're not worried about the content necessarily being ripped away, but maybe you're more concerned about someone taking your stream and posting it somewhere else and then getting a large bandwidth bill, then this is the thing for you. So what you can do with the referrer policy is you can go in and you can say, I only want this played back from mycoolstreams.com. And so when that request comes from mycoolstreams.com, that reference of the domain is in the header. Fastly sees it and says, you can have it. But if it comes from rosesawesomesite.com, they'll reject it. It'll get a 403 forbidden. Okay. Or if I can go into the console and I see the actual M3U8 URL and I try to play it back locally, it's not going to play back. Okay. So it'll only come back from the site or the domain that you allow it. And then you can also add multiple sites. So you can do subdomains. So, you could be like events.wowza.com. You could do, I don't know, webinars.something, whatever. So you can do multiples, and you can change it on the fly and they'll update almost real time. So it gives you more control, but for right now it's API only. So there's that limitation currently, but we're looking to add it to the UI in the near future. So another great security option for some of you that have been looking for something that isn't as intense as token off, but gives you great security options to protect your streams from going out to the world that you don't want to have it. So I think that's it. I think that's all I had. But always, if you guys have more questions about the differences or what you can and can't do, always write into support, and we're happy to answer questions for you.
All right. Thank you, Matt. That was great. Yeah. I'm always curious about how you can go about protecting your stream. I mean, there's so many different kinds of options out there, but I don't think like what you're talking about in terms of domains for those URLs, I don't think a lot of people think about it in that way. They think more about DRM or.
Yeah, I mean, a good example is like somebody had a stream one time and they found the M3U8 and they posted it on like Facebook, just the URL, and they're like, I only wanted 100 people to watch the stream, and like, how did 1,000 people see it? Like, there was no way, we had no way to protect it. They had no way to protect it from too many viewers, right? And so when you're on a budget or if you're an event person, one way to lock it down is the refer. So anyway, it's very helpful. It's very helpful. So
awesome.
Good point.
All right. Thank you, Mac. Rose, I love and want to hear more about pre-recorded as live. Let's talk about it.
All right. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I want to make sure all of our guests today are aware that this workflow is possible in Streaming Cloud because it combines two of our really powerful features, the Transcoder with the Cloud Scheduler. So next slide. So you can stream a pre-recorded video as live, but you can also schedule those files days or weeks in advance. So how it works basically is Streaming Cloud will download your file, which does have to be hosted on a web server, Google Storage, or an S3 bucket. Cloud will download that file for you, and it will stream it to Facebook and YouTube using the RTMP protocol, and it doesn't know that it's streaming a file. It just shows your video as live. So this is actually much more common than you may realize. And next time you see a live stream on social media, you may ask yourself now, is it really? And the reason why this is so popular to stream pre-recorded is because that eliminates a lot of stress of what could potentially go wrong during a live stream, and things can happen. So, you wouldn't have to worry about if you had a network issue, something happened with the camera, the encoder, somebody screws up, says or does the wrong thing, you can just start over, you can edit it. The point being that you can just clean it up the way you want to, and then when it's in its beautiful perfection, You can stream it to cloud, we'll send it out, and all your viewers are like super impressed with this perfect event that you hosted, right? So yeah, let's take a quick look at how you set this up in cloud. Next slide. So I think most people, when they go into the Streaming Cloud Manager, they click on live streams and that the black nav bar there. But as Mac was just showing you, there is another way to set things up, and you can create your own transcoder. It just has some customized settings available to you. So you would just click on Advanced, the drop-down would appear, you click on the transcoder, and as Mac quickly showed you already, you would just name your transcoder, enter some information about that. Next slide. And we saw this really quickly, but I just want to go over it again. For this particular workflow, for source protocol, you want to make sure you have that last option checked, file. For the source delivery method, pulling from a source URL, the source is where you have that pre-recorded file stored. So again, it has to be on Google Cloud or an S3 bucket. I had one set up in my S3 bucket, so it provides me with an object URL, and that is what you enter in that field right there for the source file. So that is my MP4 video that will be streamed as live. Quick tip for you, when you are setting this up, if no matter what you're using, it doesn't have to be the S3 bucket, but when you are provided with that source file or that object URL, take that URL, make sure you drop that into a browser and play that. Make sure that video is playing first before you come in here and set this all up. And the reason I suggest that to you is because if you go in here and go through all these steps, and then for some reason, when it's time for your event, it's not working properly, you could spend a lot of time, trying to figure out what did I do wrong in cloud or the scheduler or the transcoder, when the whole time it could have just been right here that your file didn't upload properly. So just a little tip for you there. Check that first, could save you some headaches, okay? Next slide, please. So once Streaming Cloud knows where your file is and they have access to it, you want to let Streaming Cloud know where you want to send the stream to. So a stream target is the destination for your stream. In Cloud Manager, you would just click on Add a Stream Target. And for this particular workflow, you would set up a stream target for Facebook, and then you would name that, fill out a few different fields there. You come back, you click Add a Stream Target again. You'd set one up for YouTube as well. You will get an option at some point as far as what transcoder you would like to select. And I think, again, we saw this real quickly during Mac's demo, but you can select pass-through transcoder for this workflow instead of the adaptive bitrate transcoder, and I'll tell you why. Facebook and YouTube, they already have their own built-in adaptive bitrate streaming algorithm, so they do all of that for you. No need for you to have Streaming Cloud do that as well. So go ahead and just name your stream targets, set them up, select pass-through transcoder for both. And by the way, you could also send the stream to your own personal website. So it's not just possible to send it to social media, you could simulcast it to your own site as well. Next slide. So Streaming Cloud knows where your file is that needs to stream live. It knows where it's supposed to send it to. This third step is you have to actually schedule when you want Streaming Cloud to send that out to your viewers. So what you would do is go back into the nav bar in Streaming Cloud Manager, click on Advanced again, click on Schedules, and you want to let Streaming Cloud know when you want that file to actually start streaming now on your social media. So want to point out real quickly here, there's a couple of steps, and this is a high level overview. I'm going to link to the full step-by-step tutorial for you. But the first step in this whole process is you created a transcoder. Cloud has to go and get your file and download it. So you need to give that a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to download that file, make sure it's ready to go. It's not going to start playing that stream though until it has in the schedule the exact time. So let me give you an example. Say on a Sunday morning, you have promoted your live event to begin at 9 a.m. And that's when everyone is expecting it to start, right at 9 a.m., right? When you come in here and you create that transcoder, you want to start that maybe 10 minutes maybe longer if you have a huge file that you're going to stream. Give it about 10 minutes to get that file, process it, download it. And you don't have to worry that it's going to start it early or anything like that. It won't. It'll just be ready to go. And it waits until the time that you enter here in this step. So in the schedule, you would choose the exact date and time that you want that to begin playing on social media there for you. And keep in mind too, I wanted to share with you that you can schedule this in bulk. This is a workflow that a lot of our customers really love because we have one in particular, Freeman. They're a global live event company. They literally schedule hundreds of pre-recorded videos as live a month. And what's really cool about this is you don't have to have anybody sitting there clicking start stream or stop stream for all these different events. Once you set it up here in the cloud scheduler and the transcoder, you don't even have to worry about it. You don't have to have any staff there monitoring it. If you wanted to know if everything's working properly, you could always set up webhooks. That is just some alerts that will come your way. It's a status update, that things have started, they've stopped on time. But other than that, you can go in here and just set it up, like I said, as far in advance as you want to. And Streaming Cloud works like just a well-oiled machine. It takes care of all of it for you. So that, again, is just very high-level overview, but I want to share that with you because it can save you a lot of time. Again, you don't have to worry about the live event. You don't have to worry about things going wrong. And Facebook and YouTube don't know that they're streaming a file. And you can take advantage of all the benefits that come with streaming something is live. A lot of the statistics show that more viewers are attracted to a live stream rather than one they have to click to play. So yeah, take advantage of this. If you have any questions about it, you could always reach me in the Wowza community forums. This is available as well to set up through the Streaming Cloud REST API. And we do have the use case blog on our website if you'd like to read more about how people are using this. So you could get some ideas from there. But that's how that works. Back to you, Justin.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself. That's always the most difficult part. All right. Well, hey, thank you all for doing those presentations. Definitely appreciate it. We do have some questions, one that came in and two that came in prior to the webinar. When you select a location, does that mean your stream is only available in that select location? Is there an option to select multiple locations? I think that was related to, well, Jeff, maybe you could respond.
Yeah, this one came in when Mac was setting the transcoder up. And just a quick answer for this, that location is just the origin server that your encoder is connecting to. So you want to make sure it's as close as possible to your physical encoder. Once it gets to the CDN, they're going to distribute it to local edge servers that are closer to your viewers at that point. So it doesn't restrict any playback towards location. It's just to tell the origin server that you need something closer to your specific location. You don't want to do these giant long hauls across the country because that'll add latency as well.
All right. And the last question that I had that came in via email was regarding can you screen share with WebRTC using Wowza Streaming Cloud?
I don't believe that we have that particular one set up auto-generated, but Rose, do you remember, do we have that? I know we have an example, but I don't know that we have that tied in.
We do have an example, I believe, on our Wowza GitHub page.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I would say, yes, you could use our example and you could put in all the details to point to your transcoder using that WebRTC information. So if you were to build a WebRTC live stream, yes, you could take all of those details and populate that into our example, and you could screen share using that example.
And I think the GitHub example that Rose is referencing not only allows the screen share, but also includes compositing your own webcam over it. So it's definitely a much more robust option than just screen sharing.
Right. The caveat is it's an example. So
it's actually hosted somewhere, I believe. So
it is.
Yeah. So we can they can pull it up and test it that way. But of course, if you really want it built into your site, you're not going to want all those options to type information in available as our examples have.
Right. So that was my only copy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the only other thing that I'm remembering too is that the screen share functionality in Streaming Cloud isn't supported on mobile devices. Just wanted to mention that, but it is possible.
All right. Well, those are all the questions I really have that came in here. I want to thank you all, Mac, Rose, Jeff, for joining us in this webinar. If anybody has any other questions, I mean, now's the time to ask them. Otherwise, I think that's it for us. Definitely, if you have any thoughts as well about what you'd like to hear in a future webinar, the 301, I believe, is what we had just asked about. I'd love to hear that. So if you want to email me, webinars@wowza.com, and let me know what you'd like to hear in a 301 webinar, that would be great. Other than that, you can definitely contact technical support from wowza.com/support. And if you need to get a hold of sales, there is the email address as well as the toll-free number. So again, thank you, Mac, Rose, Jeff, for joining us, and everyone else, have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you all.